Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. So this morning we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 28, Kapila's Instructions on Devotional Service, Text 43. Svayonisho yata chyatir. Svayonisho yata chyatir. Ekam nana pratiyate. Ekam nana pratiyate. Yoninam guna vaishamyat. Yoninam guna vaishamyat. Tatatma prakritaustitaha. Tatatma prakritaustitaha. Svayonisho yata chyatir. Ekam nana pratiyate. Yoninam guna vaishamyat. Tatatma prakritaustitaha. Svayonisho yata chyatir. Ekam nana pratiyate. Yoninam guna vaishamyat. Prakrata prakritaustitaha. Jyoti. Ekam nana pratiyate. Yoninam guna vaishamyat. Tatatma prakritaustitaha. Svayonisho yata jyoti. Ekam nana pratiyate. Yoninam guna vaishamyat. Tatatma prakritaustitaha. Svayonisho yata jyoti.
Ekam nana pratiyate. Yoninam guna vaishamyat. Tatatma prakritaustitaha.
Word to word. Svayonisho. In forms of wood. Yata, as, jyoti, fire, ekam, one, nana, differently, pratiyate, is exhibited, yoninam, of different wombs, guna vaishamyat, from the different conditions of the modes, tata, so, Atma, the spirit soul, Prakrita, in the material nature, Sthita, situated. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhayacharana Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. As fire is exhibited in different forms of wood, so, under different conditions of the modes of material nature, the pure spirit soul manifests itself in different bodies. Purport. It is to be understood that a body is designated. Prakriti is an interaction by the three modes of material nature, and according to these modes, someone has a small body and someone has a very large body. For example, the fire in a big piece of wood appears very big, and in a stick the fire appears small. Actually, the quality of fire is the same everywhere, but the manifestation of material nature is such that according to the fuel, the fire appears bigger and smaller. Similarly, the soul in the universal body, although of the same quality, is different from the soul in the smaller body. The small particles of soul are just like sparks of the larger soul. The greatest soul is the supersoul, but the supersoul is quantitatively different from the small soul. The supersoul is described in the Vedic literature as the supplier of all necessities of the smaller soul, Nityo Nityanam. One who understands the distinction between the supersoul and the individual soul is above lamentation and is in a peaceful position. When the smaller soul thinks himself quantitatively as big as the larger soul, he is under the spell of Maya, for that is not his constitutional position. No one can become the greater soul simply by mental speculation. The smallness or greatness of different souls is described in the Varaha Purana as Svamsha Vibhinamsha. The Svamsha soul is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Vibhinamsha souls, or small particles, are eternally small particles, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Mamayavamsha Jiva Loka Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha. The small living entities are eternally part and parcel, and therefore it is not possible for them to be quantitatively as great as the Supersoul. Om Jnanatimirandasya Grananjana Shalakya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutare Svayam Rupakara Mayam Dadate Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Dalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sate Devi Pranamami Haripriya Pancha Kalpadurupishcha Kripa Sindhyub Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming this morning to Srimad Bhagavatam class. So we are discussing the beautiful discussion between Mother Devahuti and Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Kapila appearing as her son. And so in the last series of verses, Lord Kapila was explaining or at least, it came up before also. Where was it? I remember Sanjeev Prabhu, he was also about the fire and the sparks, in text 40. So, explaining the Achintya Bheda Veda Tattva, the simultaneous oneness and difference from the Supreme Lord with everything, and especially here in today's verse, we hear about the difference, and Prabhupada elaborates in the Prabhupada, the similarity and difference between the Supreme Soul, Krishna, and the individual tiny Jiva souls, which is all of us. So, and Prabhupada explains how, although qualitatively, as we know, we heard many analogies of like the drop of water in the ocean being similar to the water of the whole ocean, and here the spark of fire. If it isn't fire, it also has similar qualities and all of that. And so Prabhupada was in the Purport is explaining how how it is foolish for individual soul to think himself quantitatively equal to the super soul, to the big soul. I remember in one Purport in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada, I don't remember the exact words, but he puts it very nicely there also, that point, where he says that the individual soul, we may be the cause for some big skyscraper or something that we managed to create here, so-called. Of course, we know we are in material nature. In fact, we're only a small component of being the doer, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, that there's those 5, and the individual soul is only one of them. But in any way, so we know Prakriti Kriyamanini Gune Karmani Sarvasha Ankare Vimudatmat Kartahamiti Manyate. The conditioned souls, we like to think ourselves as the soul doer, even though in actuality it's basically carried out by material nature. But yeah, so still, the conditioned soul, it might think himself as being the cause of a skyscraper, but the cause of the entire universe is, Prabhupada says, the cause of the big universe is the big soul, the super soul. So, and we hear, so and on the point of, but still that the tendency is there for the conditioned souls. We know when we generally, it's when we come to a point of being frustrated with trying for gross material sense gratification, we see that it's not fulfilling, it just gives more miseries again and again. Then the tendency is for this impersonal conception of thinking that, actually, we're all one. And so in one purport in the beginning of 11th canto, I was reading yesterday, there's it's very nicely put there by, I think these purports I heard were written actually then by Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu. So we know Prabhupada, he left during, I think, he did up to 14th chapter in 10th canto, and then his disciples continued. So, but Prabhu, he's also, he translated the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which Ganesham Govinda Prabhu is currently discussing on the weekends. So, so he very nicely put it there. Where is it? Yeah, so he, in fact, the discussion there's that's when Vasudev meets, or rather when Narad Muni visits Vasudev, the father of Krishna, at his home, and Vasudev glorifies Narad Muni obviously initially in different ways. And so in one verse he points out that, or in a few verses he points out that actually demigods, of course they are well-wishers of human society, but in fact, still they give to human beings. They give both. They give happiness and distress. And why is that? Because actually they are simply agents of karma, or attendants of karma. It calls it there. Because as we know in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that it is the demigods who supply, if like when in the part where he discusses more the karma kanda aspect, I think in the beginning of 3rd chapter, Krishna explains that the duty of any ordinary human being even, so there he's not talking about devotees, is to recognize that unless you perform yajna, you're simply a thief, using all the material necessities provided by the demigods. So in karma kanda it's at least our duty to worship the demigods, so that they are appeased and they will happily provide all the necessities very nicely. But so there we see like Prabhu is quoting Prabhupada in there as well, that the demigods, it is their service given by the Lord that they reciprocate just the way that they are worshipped. So if they're worshipped nicely, then it's their duty to give nicely, in the right quantity at the right time, all the water, light, air, everything. Whereas if human beings neglect to perform yajna, then they have to reciprocate in a way that they give miseries to the living beings, to the human beings there. So, but Vasudeva points out, but you, O Narad Muni, great saintly persons like yourself, you only give happiness. So you only, whatever you do for others, it's always purely beneficial, because what you give is pure devotional service. So, and then the purport, the point comes up where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur points out that that actually the point about nishkama, because a pure Buddha like Narad Muni, he is nishkama. He has no selfish desires. He only acts for the pleasure of the Lord and therefore for the benefit of all living beings. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that actually unless one is a fully surrendered soul, fully engaged in pure devotional service, one cannot be actually a nishkama. One cannot be nishkama. And so it's explained there then that because we see some karmis who are very altruistic, who give a lot of charity and want apparently help many other people. They think themselves as very selfless, simply living for the welfare of other human beings. But it's explained there that the altruistic karmi falsely considers himself the best friend of humanity, although he is unable to give actual benefit to others, because he is ignorant of the eternal life of bliss and knowledge beyond the temporary hallucination of material existence. Because, so we know, in fact, ultimately, the only real benefit is to engage in our real dharma of our constitutional position, savaipam saparo dharmo yato bhaktira toksache. So, and karmis don't know that. So in that way, unless we come to pure devotees, we actually cannot help anyone, anything, really, because it's only playing around with the karma that comes anyway to the living beings. And so the other group is the jnanis, who also may think themselves very selfless, that we don't engage in this gross exploitation of other living beings for our gross sense gratification. Rather, we understand ultimately everyone is God. We're all one, and it's very poignant, but also kind of funny how Prabhu puts it there. So he says, similarly, although the jnani proudly declares himself God and invites others to become God also, he neglects to explain how the so-called gods have come to be bound by the laws of material nature. And that point of how the so-called gods have come to be bound by laws of material nature, that is one of the things discussed at the end of 10th canto in 87th chapter by the prayers, or by the personified Vedas in their prayers, where they pointed out, and in fact, the purport then the Prabhu quotes Sridhar Swami, who explains that point of how Mayavadis they propose that actually we're all one, and so, which means there's only one living being really, and one power of illusion, avidya. But then the question comes: so if we are all one, so they say that there's one living being and one power of illusion, and that covers the living being, and so in that way then it produces the appearance of plurality, that there are many living beings, although in fact we're all one. But that would lead to the absurd conclusion that when any one living being becomes liberated, then actually, because we're all one, then actually everyone should be liberated automatically at that point. Because if there's no distinction between one living being and the other, so that is absurd. That doesn't make sense. Or else it would mean that if at one point one living being is liberated and another one not yet, then it would mean, this means so the one living being is partially liberated and partially covered by the illusion. So, if you think about Mayavad philosophy from many different angles, you analyze it, it really doesn't make any sense. So that's one of them. So that's on that point of how they fail to explain how this one living being, which means like God, how they have become covered by illusion. And obviously that's also the reason why we call them Mayavads, that automatically indicates Maya, illusion, would be greater than God. Otherwise, how can God come under illusion? And another nice point there, because in the prayers of personified Vedas, like one main theme is obviously because the Vedas, the major part of them actually discusses karma kanda, because the majority of human society is that's what they are ready for. Of course, nowadays in Kali Yuga, not even that, but generally speaking. And then those the portions which discuss transcendence then mostly talk about the impersonal feature of the Lord, like all the Upanishads. Although, in fact, when someone who is realized devotees, if they look at it, they do see that in many places they do actually describe the personal feature. And clearly, in many places, they do describe that ultimately the personal feature is the supreme. But so that's why in their prayers, like they offer those prayers. Perhaps you know that when it's time for creation again for Mahavishnu, as he's lying down in the Karana ocean. So at that time, the Vedas in the personified forms, they come and offer prayers to the Lord to arouse him for the benefit of all the living beings, that he again gives them, starts the creation and thus gives the conditioned souls another chance to ultimately come back to him in the spiritual world. So one main theme they do discuss in the prayers is of how actually the personal feature is supreme. So in another purport there, to text 15, Prabhu quotes Prabhupada from Krishna book, where Prabhupada explains how Brahman means greatest. So greatest, or also the one who is the maintainer of everything. And so Prabhupada says that the impersonalists are attracted by the greatness of the sky, the ocean, and so on, but not to Krishna, not to the greatness of Krishna. But in our practical life, we are attracted by the greatness of a person, and not so much by the greatness of big mountain and ocean and so on. And when I read that, I was reflecting on it that, yes, okay, but might argue, no, many people, we are attracted to the ocean, to some nice mountains and to the sky. But for how long? You might, for some hours, you might nicely enjoy sitting at the ocean or looking at the sky. But it has some appreciation is there, some taste, but then it doesn't last for long, because it lacks, without personality, there's no interaction, so it becomes boring very easily. So I was thinking it's similarly with impersonal liberation. It's nice for a while for the living being to be free from suffering, and in fact even it's kind of a little perverted reflection here also. If you do from our hectic life in the city, that's one reason why people like to go to the ocean or somewhere in the forest, to get away from the suffering. It's kind of a little liberation, right? So, but in the actual impersonal liberation also we see that, yes, for some time it's nice for the living being to be free from suffering, but then ultimately it gets boring, and that's why they fall down again, unless they somehow or other do get the opportunity to elevate themselves to devotional service. So, about the impersonalist. And now I want to briefly discuss a bit then the chapter which comes after the prayers of the personified Vedas, which were, first of all, it's really quite hilarious. One of the pretty funny pastimes, and also it, in a way it nicely shows also about how the point that because that we are qualitatively one but quantitatively different, that we are parts and parcels of Krishna, and thus that our constitutional position is simply to serve him. It comes out nicely there as well. Because Parikshit Maharaj, he, at the beginning of 88th chapter, in 10th canto, he makes this point to Shukadeva Goswami that now we see generally that devotees of Lord Shiva, that they many times are materially very opulent, whereas devotees of Krishna or Vishnu, many times they are quite poor. Because also actually, in chapter maybe 86 or 85 somewhere, bit before that, also came up the famous pastime of Sudama, whom we know, who was the childhood friend of Krishna in the Gurukul of Sandipani Muni, and then lived very impoverished all his life until then eventually, urged by his wife, he went to visit Krishna and Dwarka. So Parikshit Maharaj was pointing that out, that how is it? It looks kind of contradictory. And so Shukadeva Goswami explains first that by saying that yes, Lord Shiva, he's as Gunavatar, he's in charge of mode of ignorance, and but even though we know doesn't mean that he's actually a fact that he's a pure devotee, transcendental, but but so his role is to take care, especially also of those who are in the mode of ignorance, and to gradually elevate them. And so they, like, for example, it's explained there that Lord Shiva appears in the purport there that he appears in a special linga form in each of the 16 elements, which are worshipped by the different devotees of Lord Shiva. And so, for example, if a devotee worships an Akash linga of Lord Shiva, then he can get the whatever perfections that pertain to that element, to the sky, to ether, and or Jyotirlinga, to fire, and so on. And whereas on the other hand, Shukadeva Goswami explains that Lord Vishnu or Krishna, he's obviously, as Vishnu's Gunavatar, is in charge of mode of goodness, but he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose only business is to bring the living entities directly back to his lotus feet in their transcendental position. So he's not concerned with, his role is not to give material benefits generally, but he only wants to bring them to pure devotional service. And then he quotes actually a conversation between Krishna and Yudhishthira Maharaj, where Yudhishthira Maharaj asked the same question to Krishna himself. And Krishna famously replies, we see in Lilamrita, we see that the first verse especially quoted many times, because Srila Prabhupada, in his humility, in his pastimes, he tells of presents himself as if he would have been an attached householder, although we know obviously he never was. He's eternally perfect soul. But so on his example, many times he says that was how Krishna was reciprocating with him. Namely, Krishna tells there that Yasyaham anugrinami harishyatattanam shanai tatodanam tyachantyasya svachana dukkha. So Krishna tells that unto whom I exhibit my special mercy, Yasyaham anugrinami harishyatattanam shanai, gradually I take away all his wealth, material wealth. And then tataha, after that, tatodanam. So then when he is eventually completely impoverished, my dear devotee, tyachantyasya, then he's given up, he's abandoned by all svachana, by all his friends, relatives, all his people. And in this way he simply experiences dukkha dukkha, misery after misery. So that's that famous verse which we can use to scare away any new people. But obviously Krishna doesn't leave it with that. Then in the next verse he explains, Sayada Vitatatyaga. Vitatatyaga. Okay, maybe I start explaining, that will come. So then at that time, when he's already completely impoverished, the devotee, then still he might again think, okay, I have to endeavor again somehow or other to get some money, get some wealth. But all his endeavors will be useless, vitata. And Tatyaga, yeah, and then because of that, nirvina, he will become completely frustrated eventually. Nirvinasya tanehaya. So being completely frustrated, he will give up his endeavors for ihaya, his endeavors for dana, for wealth. And it is at that time that matpara krita maitrasya, that matpara, those who are fully devoted to me, Krishna is saying, so in other words, my pure devotees, he will go to them and krita maitrasya, he will make friendship with them, he will associate with my devotees. And then at that time, that is how he gets my full mercy. Karishyam madanograham. So, yeah, so that is Krishna's obviously vision of the living entities is completely always only seeing the spirit soul, seeing our real self. Not, of course, he knows our condition of the material body as well and what we go through there. But yeah, he cares only for us, for our real self. And so that is the reason why, for example, he boldly declares there in the scriptures how he deals with devotees. Obviously, it's not always the case like that, so we don't need to be scared. But yeah, for those who need it in this way, that's how Krishna may use the material circumstances simply to bring us closer to him. And yeah, so then, yeah, actually into text 8 there, to Yasyaha Manukarina Me, in the purport, Prabhu explains very beautifully that, that point of, for us to better understand, appreciate that, and have the proper consciousness in whatever material situations we may face. So Prabhu explains that that even for devotees we may remain in material bodies and in apparently material situations for some time, but this is simply an expression of the inconceivable mercy of the Lord, who bestows the fruits of devotion only when it has become pure. So that is one point, that bhakti, it is not a cheap thing. It's, we know, it's ultimately to regain our full trust of the Supreme Lord. We know it's in the highest, deepest expression, that is Krishna with the Vrajabasis, where the Supreme Lord has such complete trust into the devotee that he knows that they could never ever think of exploiting him, and so he completely gives himself to them, that in a way that he puts himself subordinate to them. So so that is one point, so that's why Krishna may not immediately always give the fruits that we may already have acquired by our practice of devotional service, but rather gives only that much of reciprocation, or that type of reciprocation which most perfectly brings us ever closer to him, to endeavor more and more for his pleasure. And so, continuing there, in every stage of devotion, however, the Lord watches over his devotee and sees to the gradual elimination of his karma. So that is now explaining why Krishna may do, for example, to give us apparently give us material difficulties, because actually we do have our karma where we have acquired some sinful reactions, and even though Krishna says sarvadharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarvabhavilyo moksha ishyami mashuchaha, that don't worry about the sinful reactions, I'll take care if you surrender to me. But at the same time, he may use it if it is beneficial for us. So we know, but that is then in a customized way for us. It's not a it's not never really randomly ever anyway, but it's not just according to the law of karma, but it's personally administered by Krishna. So continuing here, therefore, despite the fact that happiness and distress that devotee experiences resemble the ordinary karmic reactions, they are in fact given by the Lord Himself. And then he's quoting there from one of the prayers of personified Vedas, which we discussed before, text 40 there, that Bhavat Utta Shubha Shubha Yoho, that a mature devotee recognizes the superficially good and bad conditions he encounters as signs of the direct guidance of his ever well-wishing Lord. So a pure devotee, we understand whatever comes. We may not be able to understand why it's happening like this, but we always have to understand that's because we are a tiny jiva who has been in illusion for countless lifetimes. And we are not supposed to understand everything. But what we do need to understand is that we are fully dependent on that Supreme Soul, as we heard in today's purport discussed as well. So, and then after that, actually, I'll just try to quickly relate that pastime because it's real nice. Shukadeva Goswami then gives us an example on the point of how Lord Shiva, obviously we know actually he's also perfect in the way of being a pure devotee of Krishna, but as teaching us the lessons and as making it clear, and sometimes he does perform his pastimes in a way that he makes it clear that Krishna is ultimately the Supreme, that he's also depending on Krishna. So, and that his benedictions to the devotees may not always be apparently so beneficial for them. So that's why Shukadeva Swami then relates the pastime of Rikasura. Perhaps you know from Krishna Book of Bhagavatam that one time there was this demon called Rika who met on the road Narad Muni and who inquired from him that, "O great saint, please tell me which of the three main devatas should I worship or which of them can be pleased most quickly, most easily?" Narada Muni tells him, worship Lord Shiva. He's known as Ashutosh. He becomes very quickly satisfied or also very, very easily angered. And so, and he tells him some case stories to back up his claim. He tells him about Ravana and Vanasura. Vanasura, that's a bit earlier in 10th canto. I think recently we heard about it also. How, Lord Shiva at one point even fights on behalf of Vanasura. In Brihad Bhagavatamrita he tells that as one of the, as we know, all the devotees there, being praised by Narada Muni as being the greatest devotees, they deflect that praise. And so one of that is Lord Shiva telling that, how can I be the greatest? I am such an offender that I even fought against Krishna on behalf of Vanasura. So Narada Muni tells these examples, and Rikasura, obviously a foolish demon, rather than thinking, maybe Ravana means it was not so successful as worshipping Lord Shiva because ultimately got killed by Lord Ramchandra. But no, he was inspired, and so he took up worship of Lord Shiva, and in a very tamasic way as well, because how he worshipped him was he went to the sacred place called Kedaranath, and where he performed a type of tapasya or yajna, he considered the sacrificial fire the mouth of Lord Shiva, and every day he would offer oblations in the form of cutting off his own flesh of his body and offering it into the fire. And so then on the 7th day he got frustrated. Obviously he would have cut already quite some bit of his body and Lord Shiva still hadn't appeared or reciprocated. So then he put his own head, the hair of his head into that sacred water, tipped it in to make it fit as an offering, and was about to cut off his own head. And at that time Lord Shiva, obviously not being pleased by actually what this rascal was doing, but rather being so compassionate, he couldn't allow obviously that demon to kill himself like that in his attempt to worship him. So then Lord Shiva actually appeared from that fire, so personally, and with his arms he grabbed both of the arms of Rikasura, stopped him, and told him that, what are you doing? Please stop this. I'm known to be pleased very easily. In fact, devotees, if they just offer me a little water, I'm very easily pleased. You don't need to do such a crazy thing. And so then obviously he offers him, says, don't stop this, whatever you want, please tell me, I'll award you the benediction. And then, Rikasura, what he asks for is that he tells, oh Lord, please give me the benediction that whomever I touch with my hand, he may immediately die. So that those kind of benedictions are asked by demons. And so, Lord Shiva obviously, he already promised it, so he has to give him the benediction. And that the demon, first thing he tries to do is, he wants to put his hand on the head of Lord Shiva. So it said actually he was lusting after Mother Parvati. So, and Lord Shiva then in the pastime, obviously he would be powerful enough, even having given such a benediction, to counteract, and no one can kill Lord Shiva, he's also eternal. But in the pastime he appears very scared and runs away all over the universe until eventually he reaches Shvetadvip, which is one of the abodes of the Lord within the material world, where Kshirodhara Kashaya Vishnu resides. We hear beginning of 10th canto also the Lord Brahma and the Devatas, they approach the Lord there. And so then, and in fact there, even from afar it's described that the Lord saw Lord Shiva in distress running there, and so he immediately then assumed the form of a young brahmachari, and humbly approached the demon Rikasura, and he told him that, oh my dear son of Shakuni. So first thing he addressed him as expressing that he understands his bodily relationship of whose son he is. So that's immediately something how you can please a materialistic person. So he said, oh my dear son of Shakuni, you appear very tired. Why have you come so far from such a great distance? Please take little rest, slow down, and explain to me what's the matter. And then he tells, because you appear tired, and because after all, please take some rest, because after all it is one's material body which is with which one can fulfill all one's desire. He uses sarva kamaduk, which is, kamaduk is also used for desire, desire cows, how do you call the Surabi cows? And Prabhupada, so the quote in the Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, how he explains it there in Krishna book, it's quite hilarious. Prabhupada says, so before the demon could argue that he had no time to take rest, the Lord began to inform him about the importance of the body, and the demon was convinced. So, those kind of pastimes, we see how amazing the Supreme Lord is, that on the one hand, we know the first basic lesson in spirituality, which he elaborately explains in Bhagavad Gita, is how we are not the material body, how the body is not as important as we may think. It's just a yantra, yantarudhanimaya, a kind of a machine in which we are stuck in, which is provided by material nature, and from which we need to get out of completely, which means not just from the gross body, but develop our spiritual consciousness to get out of the subtle body as well. And yet, performing pastimes like this give great pleasure to devotees, where that same Lord, he apparently preaches to the demon that, like Prabhupada says, he informed him about the importance of the body. So, because we know the Supreme Lord is omnipotent, so he's able to do anything. He would be able to kill the demon just by his willing. He wouldn't even have to think about it, and thus solve the situation. But how can devotees relish that? Rather, he performs his pastimes in such an amazing way that it gives more and more pleasure to his devotees. So like here, he disguises himself as a little brahmachari in a way to trick the demon, and he tells him about the importance of the body. So, and yeah, further on then he says like that, because generally for materialistic people that's how it is. He says that generally one attains his purposes by taking help from others. So yeah, so you may kindly tell me what your situation is, maybe I can help you somehow. They explained it, because even at that time, even demons, they had some idea that yes, brahmanas, they are somehow powerful, they can curse, they can give benediction. So even demons would, if the opportunity is there, they would try to get some blessings of brahmanas. And like here, there's the Lord appearing as a little brahmachari. And so then Rikasura told everything to the Lord as a brahmachari. And the Lord then replied, well, but don't you know that this Lord Shiva, ever since he got cursed by Daksha, you know that's in the beginning of 4th canto, that pastime, it's quite far out as well. Ever since that curse, he simply associates with all these ghosts and hobgoblins, and pretas and pishachas. So how can you put any faith into such a person? But then he says further, but if at all, if you have any faith in him, then because after all he's Jagat Guru, he's the spiritual master of the universe, then just test it out. Just place your hand first on your head to see if that benediction may have any value, and then if it, in case it's not, then better you punish that liar. You kill Lord Shiva, so that he may not lie again. So like that, the Lord, speaking in very sweet words, bewilders that demon, and we know Rikasura. Yeah, he doesn't hesitate. He immediately puts his hand on his own head, and the head smashes as if being struck by a thunderbolt. And and further on, then even like that's something that in Brihad Bhagavatamrita we heard Lord Brahma pointed out, because Narad Muni first he goes to Lord Brahma and then to Lord Shiva. So Lord Brahma, in his deflection of his praise, he pointed out that, see, to me, the Lord, when I offended him, he didn't even speak a word in Brahma Vimohan Lila. Or in the other hand, when I did the mistake of giving the benediction to Hiranyakashipu, he chastised me not to give such benediction as Lord Nrsimhadev. But to Lord Shiva, when he did that blunder, giving such a benediction, and the Lord had to come to rescue him, the Lord didn't chastise him, rather he sympathized with him. Because then Krishna, in the form of that Brahman, he says to Lord Shiva, very innocently again, just see, O Mahadev, how this wicked demon had been killed by his own sinful reactions. Indeed, what living being can hope for good fortune if you offend great saints? What to speak of the Lord and spiritual master of the universe? So, referring to Lord Shiva. So, yeah, it's so sweet how the Lord there, he says, oh, blood, just see, amazing how that happened, right? Even though he's the one who orchestrated everything. So that's the sweetness and the greatness of the Supreme Lord, of whom we are eternal part and parcels, and whom we can never compete with, but can take ever-increasing pleasure indirectly by appreciating his pleasure pastimes, his enjoying. And I guess I gotta stop here because we're running out of time. So thank you very much. If there's any quick question or comment. Yes, bro. Yeah, so that's Shukadeva Goswami quotes that conversation between Krishna and Yudhishthira Maharaj in beginning of 88th chapter in 10th canto. So it's text 8 and 9. 1088, 8 and 8, 9, and it continues, but like the two verses I quoted are 8 and 9 in 88th chapter of 10th canto. Yeah. Yes, bro? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.